Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Mr. Moore.
Good morning, Rick. How are you, sir?
Nice to see you, pal.
Good deal.
Got some other folks coming in. Awesome. Brad, nice to see your face.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
Excellent, excellent. We're the same, thankfully. It's just a rainy, dreary day here in Atlanta, but the temperature's really nice.
I love it.
Beautiful sunshine this week.
I don't think we're going to get any of that, I think, till like Wednesday or Thursday. They're sending it over from Alabama. It's not very nice. Not very nice. Good morning, Cheryl. Oh, we can't hear you, but we can see you. Now you're unmuted. Oh, you were unmuted. There you are.
There. Hi there. Good morning.
Nice to see you. How are you?
You good? We have a sunny day here.
Oh, lucky you. Lucky you. I see Mark is online. Nice to. There he is.
Morning, Rick. How are you?
I'm well, sir. It's nice to see you this morning.
Yeah, happy days.
Happy days indeed. Manny and Tyson are not giving us any love, nor is Fran. All good. All good. All right, we'll just give everybody just another minute or two, and then we'll get cracking at this. See how we do. Meanwhile, I will have some water. Mr. Miller, I did get an answer to your question as I shared with you. I guess I can probably share that with the rest of the group because I think it's relevant.
Great. It was an interesting discussion we had.
It was. So for the rest of you on board here, Mr. Miller posed the question to me of what happens now with people working remote? Do they get to take a deduction for a home office because they're working from home? I consulted the great accounting gods, and they have told me no, that people are not allowed to take a deduction for workers working at a home office. Well, individuals are not allowed to take a deduction unless you're a contractor. If you're a contractor, the answer is yes. You can take a percentage of your square footage as long as it's designated as, true office space. But if you're a W-2 employee, unfortunately not. You are not allowed to. I'm sure that's going to come up for us, and I'm sure for many of you, you're going to be asked that question as well, because you're connected to IT naturally, they think you're accountants as well. So now you have more information about that. And of course, I will put the big disclaimer that if you want to get all the information, you should consult with the appropriate tax professional. There you have it. There you have it. All right. We've got some other folks that are going to be wandering in, I am sure. So let me share my screen and let's get started.
Fran, can you see Rick's screen now? His face is there.
Yeah, I closed the meeting and rejoined, so I'm good.
That's why I wanted to make sure you could
Hello, Fran.
Yeah. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Fran.
I'm great. Everything is good, thank you. No complaints at all. All right, can everyone see my screen? All right.
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. You can jump in and interrupt him if you have a question. He'll definitely have a question and answer period at the end. Good morning, everybody. But I'm going to, if you would like to, you can put a question in the chat and I will also make sure it gets answered as well. But I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone, which Rick, means that you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
But thank you for being here, everybody. We're happy to see you so bright and early on this, what in Atlanta is a dreary Tuesday morning.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I love it.
All right, can everybody hear me? Perfect. Excellent. It's nice to have everybody on board this morning. Some of the information I'm going to cover today is going to sound strikingly familiar to the Windows Virtual Desktop webinar we had from a few weeks ago. There are a number of differences, but if you see some similarities, it's not deja vu, it's actually true. There's a little bit of overlap. So just kind of giving you the heads up on the front end of that. So to move on, a little bit of information about us and about what we do and how we do it. I think that we've had a lot of success with this webinar series, and a lot of people have called and asked us questions and requested some further information. It really is a pleasure for us to provide this information and to help everybody kind of move forward in the direction of embracing some of these different technologies in a way that you can understand it, as well as a way that you can actually explain it to your customers. Just as a reminder, here in a couple of weeks, October 20th, is the next Catapult. This one is focused on generating revenue and metrics. If those of you that are connected in the MSP world, I think you'll find this to be a remarkable way to kind of up your game and understand a little bit more about how to leverage some of the systems that you're currently using now to become more efficient and more effective. So that's coming up on the 20th. It's a 3-day event in the morning. From 10 a.m. until 1. We've actually moved that time up to be more friendly to our West Coasters. And it's 3 hours, and it's awesome. You will walk away smarter than you walked in. As some of you on the call have already been part of that, know it's a fantastic event. And now it's virtual. So you can grab a cup of coffee and sit back and just learn all sorts of cool stuff. All right, let's talk about hybrid networks and really what they are. So a hybrid network is really nothing more than part of your network being in your office, part of your network being in the cloud. That's really what it is. Most of you are using it right now. You're just not really aware that you're using it. So I'm going to show you where you're using it. But before I do, I want to tell you a little bit about how we got where we are. A lot of this stuff you can say was actually started, you can say that it started in 1999, but the real truth of the matter is it really started back in the 70s. I know those of us who have been in IT like me for a really long time will remember a time when you had a green screen and that you connected into a mainframe in order to do computing. This was where kind of this stuff really began. Having a piece of equipment that was in front of you and then having your computer stuff kind of over there, right? That's the way that it worked. So that was the way computing was done for a really long time. And as time went by, we started putting servers on the ground at people's offices, of course, the rise of PCs. But then we started to kind of take a trip in the Wayback Machine, right? And this really started to happen in 1999 when Salesforce was born. They were really the pioneers of a hybrid cloud model before we were even using the word cloud. An application that didn't live on somebody's computer, it actually lived on servers that were out there, right? And people started to subscribe and started to use it. That was way back in 99. Well, not a lot of people paid attention to it. It showed that there was great promise with this new model, but a lot of people weren't using it at the time. In fact, a lot of people hadn't even heard of Salesforce at that particular time. And then in 2000, something interesting started to happen. The internet achieved this 97% level of penetration. That means that a lot of the information that was flowing around through information system was now moving through the internet. 97% of it was. But why is that important? Well, in 2000, which seems like a whole long time ago, that really became the glue that started to pull everything together. The first thing we had to have is we had to have computing resources. The second thing we had to have is a means by which to connect everybody together that was reliable and starting to become fast. That really, we reached this very interesting inflection point at 2000. In 2002, the next piece that we needed really kind of started to hit the mainstream. And that's when this company called VMware introduced this technology where you could take servers away from being bound by their physical devices and actually take virtual machines, full servers, and stack them inside of one piece of hardware. Back when I started in IT, you had to have one physical server for each application or each thing that you needed to do. When virtualization was introduced, we could actually take 3, 4, 5, or even 10 servers and stack them inside of one box and really kind of share all those resources that were there that in some cases just weren't being used. Now, VMware wasn't the first one to put virtualization out there. No, It was a technology that was actually invented by IBM about 10 years before, a little bit before that. But they're the first ones that started to bring it into the mainstream and actually make it affordable for companies. Now, I say affordable. Back then, as some of you will remember, if you were early adopters of VMware, affordable meant you were spending many thousands of dollars per virtual machine in order to use their software, or as they would like to say, to take advantage of the features of their software. As time went by, that cost started to go down. So in 2006, well, that's when Amazon really kind of took their web services and introduced what was called Elastic Network. And Elastic Network was the ability for normal people like us to be able to go to Amazon and say, I want to buy some of your excess capacity and I want to stick my computers in your data center. That happened in 2006. And then in 2014, of course, Microsoft, after studying what was going on at Amazon for the better part of 15 years, decided to relaunch and rebrand their version of web services as Azure. And that was in 2014. So why am I sharing this timeline with everybody? Well, it's because you have to understand that each one of these pieces was a stepping stone to get us to where we are now. It really was the introduction of a hypervisor and then cloud-based networking, and all of a sudden opened up all these possibilities of being able to do computing in a vastly different way than we were doing it up to this point. Remember, guys like me, who are, you know, by all standards these days are considered an IT dinosaur because I've been walking the earth with IT for 30 years. We've been telling people all this time, you need to have servers. They need to be in a machine room in your office, right? A server room, preferably not a mop closet, preferably not under a sprinkler system, certainly preferably not located next to the hot water heater. We've been telling you for a long time that you needed to put these servers in your offices and that you had to have all your machines connecting in. And then some of you took that to the next level with us where we had multiple sites that were connected into one center location in order to be able to feed information out securely to all these folks. It's all true. We didn't steer you wrong. Now we've gotten to the point where we don't have to have all that stuff living in your office any longer. But before I tell you what that kind of looks like, I need to let you already know that a lot of people say, well, I don't believe in hybrid network. There's no way that I'm going to put my faith in having servers and data and all that other stuff out there in Microsoft's hands. No way. Over my dead body am I even going to let that happen. In fact, there's no way you're going to convince me that that's going to be nearly as good, reliable, easy to use as my network is in my office now. Well, I've got some bad news for you. Most of you are already using it. And in many ways, it's right there hiding in plain sight. So here's what I mean. There are kind of 4 stages that have really kind of taken place with hybrid cloud networks. We've already moved for the most part through 3 of them. I know, you didn't really think about it, did you? The first one kind of I talked about was Salesforce, right? And a lot of you started using Gmail. You, your customers, all those other people started using Gmail. How many of you have a Gmail account? I know I do, right? Well, what's Gmail? It's a web-based email system. You don't have to install a client on your machine. Only thing you have to do is have internet access in order to get to it. Where does the data live? Out on the cloud, on Google's network. People have been using it for years. Well, guess what? That's hybrid cloud. Nothing that you're really doing here. There's a machine here and a machine here, and the data lives over there. Doesn't live in your office, right? So that was kind of stage 1. People using Salesforce, people using Gmail. Stage 2, a lot of you are using it right now. Information being able to be stored on the internet in a cloud network and synchronizing between multiple devices simultaneously. Anybody heard of Dropbox before? Of course you have. Most of you probably have used it. OneDrive is the same way. No different here. The data doesn't really live on your local machines. It lives out there, and then you have a connection to it. Your home machine, your work machine, all these different places, right? That was kind of stage 2 of hybrid computing, right here. Stage 3, well, you knew what this was going to be. Everybody does this, right? How many of you use Alexa or Siri? I know I do. Any of you? I know more than 3 or 4 of you do, right? Of course you do. You probably use it every day. What's the weather? How long is it going to take me to get here? Why does my teenage daughter look like her head is spinning around on the swivel? All these different kinds of things that you ask these systems, and they tell you, right? Waze is another really good example. How long is it going to take me to get from here to here? Where are all the cops hiding? That is hybrid cloud computing. You talk into your device, it sends that information out to the internet, it gets you an answer and comes back. It doesn't live on your phone. There's no way it could live on your phone. It doesn't live on your Amazon Echo. It doesn't live on any of those devices. It's a hybrid cloud network. Everybody's using it every single day, just right there in front of you and hiding in plain sight. So what's the fourth part of this? Well, the fourth stage is really starting to look at moving servers, your line of business applications, Windows Virtual Desktop. See, we've already established that it works. And I don't know if has anybody really run into a situation often where you try to use Siri or you try to use Waze or Alexa and it's offline? Has anybody run into that? I don't think I have.
No, they just can't understand my Southern accent.
Well, that I understand entirely. That's very, very true, and it's a challenge. You know, Chip, it's because it's an Alabama system, not an Auburn system. So the fourth stage of this really is to start to really explain to people, you've been using these technologies for a period of time. Let's talk about moving your servers into this environment, right? They don't need to be here at the office any longer because the office is a single point of failure. And it is. It is a single point of failure. And why is it a single point of failure? For all the reasons that I know that you already know, right? Every single day when you go to your office, you have to, hope and pray that, like today here in Atlanta, the weather's terrible. I feel pretty comfortable at some point today that the power is going to fluctuate. It just happens, right? But there are three key things that normally cause problems at offices, and most of the time, there's not a whole lot you can do about them. One, connectivity, right? Either it's no connectivity or slow connectivity. All the more true now with everybody working remote coming inbound, right? So that's one issue. I think probably the number one issue, power. 90% of the customers that we service and the people we talk to don't have generators. So power goes out, everything comes to a grinding halt, no matter what type of UPS that you've got. And third, of course, are updates. Updates. The ones that download into your machine and it says that you need to do a reboot. It should take just a minute or two. And of course, your machine is down for 2 hours and you can't work. Those are the three things that really kind of happen that cripple your office infrastructure, right? So we have to start thinking about things differently. We have to start looking at moving away from the traditional hub model that we've been functioning in for the last 25 or 30 years when it comes to networks and adopting something that's called the spoke methodology, right? So here's what the hub methodology looks like. And this is going to look familiar to you WVD folks, right? Here's your network. The center is your office, right? Everything's hunky-dory. People are connecting in from home, their PCs at work, they're connecting into with servers, mobile devices. Here are your users. And of course, here's your remote office or your bank branch or whatever it may need to be. This is what a good Monday morning looks like, right? Phone's not ringing, people logged in, everything's working the way that it's supposed to, right? All of a sudden, things stop. Something's happened with the network. Power loss, servers rebooted, whatever the case may be. The moment that this happens, well, guess what? It becomes a bad Monday. All these connections drop. Everybody stops working until things get fixed. And that can take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, just depending on what the issue is, right? This is the way that people compute now. There's a better way, and it's called the spoke method. And this is what the spoke method looks like. The center of the picture here is the Azure network, right? Here's your office right over here. Here's your remote office. And of course, here are users working from home, PCs, mobile devices, and of course, your users. Well, this is a pretty fortified network, and it's running. This is a good Monday morning, as I think all of you would agree. Now, let's say the same thing happens. You lose connectivity or power at your office. Well, that's okay, because when that goes down, everything still stays operational. Users, remote connectors, remote branches, all that stuff continues to work exactly like it's supposed to. Why? Because your servers are over there. Your office just becomes an extension, a spoke in the wheel from the Azure network. This is what hybrid computing really is all about, is transferring that risk over to a reliable, almost bulletproof network that is out there. That's really what it's all about. So how do you get there? Well, it's not that hard. You can take a series of steps, right, in order to get there. The easiest first step to take is something called Azure Site Recovery. The second step is kind of moving your infrastructure or figuring out what it takes to move from being a hub topology to spoke. And then third, of course, is a Windows Virtual Desktop. Well, the first one's actually not as hard to do as you might think. Let me tell you a little bit about what Azure Site Recovery is. It's a fantastic system that allows you to take the servers that are living at your office right now, and online, it will take every one of those bit by bit, and it will make carbon copies of them up into the Azure Data Center. And it does this synchronization automatically for you. So what happens is it makes a replicated copy from one place to the other using the internet. It's all encrypted, it's all secure, but it just happens automatically, right? What does that look like? Well, it kind of looks like this. Here's your office on the left. Here's Azure on the right. It just synchronizes this. And you have two choices, either every 30 seconds or every 5 minutes. And what happens is you do nothing. You just set it up and you walk away. It will report to you. It will let you know if it's been successful, if it has an issue. But the idea here is that you get a copy of your virtual machines off-site. Here's the cool part. You lose power at your office, and the power company tells you that you're going to be down for 4 or 5 hours due to a repair. You can make the decision at that particular moment to do something called failing over, which is nothing more than telling the servers that are in Azure to go live and take the place of the machines that are in your office. In doing so, you can allow your users to connect in through VPN, through Windows Virtual Desktop, however you choose. They can connect into the Azure network and continue to do operations as if the network was running at your office. Once those servers come online and you're live, you work. And when your old servers come back online at your office, Azure is intelligent enough to sense it, and it will ask you when you want to go back in the other direction. And here's how cool this becomes. You can actually tell Azure to take all the changes that have happened on the servers while you've been running remote and synchronize those all back to your office servers so that they're back being exact copies of each other. It's called failing back. The synchronization happens first, and then you can pick a moment in time and say, I want to flip the switch and go back to my office network. Now at Decision Digital, we typically recommend that once you've made the decision to fail over to Azure, that you stay running there somewhere between 18 and 24 hours. Even though the power may have come back up, we want to make sure that all those changes get synchronized back to the office before we start to redirect people back over to the office network. It's nothing more than just being completely safe when we do this. I'd suggest you adopt the same kind of protocol for your customers just to make sure that you don't get too zealous with failing back. At the same time, I would also encourage you to really set some parameters in place about when you wish to fail over. We believe an outage of an hour or less, you shouldn't make the call to do it. We typically function under the premise of if we're down an hour, we'll wait 1 more hour. And if during that second hour, we don't really believe that we're going to be back online or things are going to take longer, we'll make the decision during that second hour to fail the customer over. I think less than an hour, you really shouldn't do anything. An hour to 2 hours, you should kind of wait and see if something's going to clear or if the issue is going to be resolved. If you get to the 2 hour mark and it looks like it's going to be any longer, it's really best to start the process of failing over. It only takes the time that it takes those servers to come online, which is usually somewhere around 10 minutes. So it's not something that's a function of taking too long to fail over. It's just a matter of if you fail over, it's a different way that your users are going to connect. So we want to make certain that if we're going to disrupt people, that we do it and we plan well for it and at the same time, we leave them in that environment for a period of time so as to not fail them over and then 30 minutes later try to fail them back. Does that make sense to everybody? You can nod. Excellent. So this is how it works. It works remarkably well. It is super efficient. The customer, we have our servers replicating as well. It actually, it's a little spooky how well it works. Failing over is, relatively speaking, is uneventful. Failing back, we just take extra caution. But this is really the first way to kind of dip your toe into what it looks like to be in a hybrid cloud environment, is setting up site recovery and letting your machines replicate there, and then doing planned failover tests. We think that probably once or twice a year is probably more than adequate. They should be planned in advance so you can make sure that they work properly. But I think this is an easy way to kind of get in and understand how the hybrid cloud model starts to work. So this is kind of step one. What does step two look like? Well, step two, moving from being a hub to being a spoke. And that really requires more of a project of planning what it's going to look like to take all of your machines that are on premise and actually have them activated full-time inside of Azure. A little secret. You would really use Azure Site Recovery to transfer your servers up to Azure. You don't have to do heavy lifting. If you set them up and let them replicate, well, then you can fail over and go live inside of Azure permanently without doing anything else. So the first way actually leads to the second way and makes the process actually go a lot easier. And what I'm trying to say is that you don't have to find yourself rebuilding your network inside of Azure. No, you can just carbon copy it up and then fail over. What does that look like? Well, it kind of looks like this. You move your servers from one side to the other. And once they're in place, well, then Azure becomes completely live. And your users from home, from your different work areas, they all connect into Azure. You're not exactly completely bulletproof, but you're about as close as you're going to get. If your office goes down, remember, it doesn't affect anything. But this is what it looks like. All you use is connecting into the Azure data center. Now, there is a little bit of a modification on this with larger networks. People that have got larger networks who have got high authentication needs. And what I mean by that is a lot of users that are constantly authenticating against Active Directory, or if you have a lot of print jobs or large CAD drawings that require printing on a plotter or a large scale printer, you're probably going to want to maintain some kind of smaller domain controller on premise so that those jobs can spool locally and not get sent up the wire and then sent right back down. It's really a more efficient way to go, but it doesn't have to be anything more than a very, very small server that really functions as nothing more than an Active Directory backup domain controller and a print server. It will keep some of the authentication traffic off of the wire. I find that this, again, is really helpful people who have got large-scale printing needs or have a really high number of users that are authenticating constantly. It's good to have that other tiny server on the ground and let the two of them talk to each other. Here's the best part about it. Azure out of the box is actually built to talk to that domain controller at your site. Seamless communication, kept in touch all the time, be no different than if you had two domain controllers on the ground at the same time. They just talk to each other. So that's really kind of what part two looks like. Part three, well, part three, you need to go back and look at the webinar that we did 2 weeks ago to understand a little bit more about Windows Virtual Desktop. We did a really, really good presentation about what the differences are there, what it looks like, how it works. So if you want to get more information or want to go back and watch that, just let us know. Alyssa will send out a link to you so you can watch it and you can kind of get the skinny on that. But those are the 3 steps that all kind of come together in order to kind of build this model. It's not hard. It's just a different way of wrapping your mind around what this is. That's all. You just have to think it through and plan it and start to introduce people to what the advantages of kind of reimagining their network really look like. So what are those advantages? Pretty easy. There's 3 really high-level ones. There are probably 50, but here are the 3 that I really think are important, right? 1, availability. It is really hard to beat the availability that Microsoft puts out there. It is stated it's 3 nines. It works exceedingly well. One of the things that I also really, really like about it is gigabit connectivity for everybody, every day, all the time. It is fast. In fact, it's so fast that Frank will certainly nod when I say this. Time and time again, when we move people into our VM Anywhere environment, where we're hosting QuickBooks and TigerPaw and Sage and some line of business applications for other companies, people repeatedly comment to us, this runs faster than their on-premise network, and they can't seem to understand why. How is it that my servers are down the hall, but this thing that's over the wire is running so much faster? It's a common piece of feedback that we get, do we not, Frank? All the time. It's because the network is a really high-speed network. It is engineered to levels that will exceed, in most cases, what people have on-premise. Plus, it's available, it replicates, it is redundant. We have customers that have desired to have geographic redundancy where their servers are actually copied into another geographic region for the ultimate in fault tolerance. These are all things that are really, really important. Plus, you get the added advantage of being connecting to it with just about any kind of device that you want. PCs, yes. Macs, yes. Tablets, yes. All those being served by one platform. I really like that. The other thing that I really like is scalability. For the last 30 years, some of you have worked with us, we've always had to think really what the world is going to look like 5 years down the road when it comes to our servers. Overbuying, because I couldn't go back to, say, somebody like Mark or Chip and say, hey, guess what? We're 2.5 years in, we need more storage, we need more CPU, we need more memory, because we did a really terrible job of actually thinking about what this is going to look like. I'm sorry, my crystal ball wasn't working quite that well the day that we designed this network, right? We always had to overbuy. We don't have to overbuy any longer. One of the nicest things here is that we can scale this network to where we are right now. And as time goes by, if we need more resources, guess what? We click the mouse. We increase memory, we increase CPU, we increase storage. It's all scalable. It's there for us to use whenever we want to. And other thing that I really like, capital expense goes way down. Frank and I are working on a network right now with a customer that needs a piece of software. The capital expense for the 2 servers and getting everything in place is north of $100,000. I mean, it is insane what it's going to take to run this particular piece of software. In this case, it'd be really nice to be able to go to the customer and say, you know what, $5,000 a month, you don't need to have the servers any longer. It's really become something of a different kind of conversation of, let's replace capital expense with operating expense. Predictable spending over a period of time, and you don't have to replace servers any longer. I love that. Last and certainly not least is the economy. Well, we can get out of the server procurement business, which we were just kind of talking about. But the other thing that's going to start to bear down on all of us, especially those of us in IT, what are we going to do about the new telecommuting world? What's the responsibility of companies, IT providers, to keep those people connected? The statistic right now is about 60% of current workforce is going to be under some kind of telecommuting permanently. Are we responsible for providing them with machines? Are we responsible for managing and maintaining their home networks? What is that going to look like? Where does our responsibility as a company end and somebody else's begin? When you start to look at a hybrid cloud network, especially Windows Virtual Desktop, you start to transfer that responsibility. I don't really want to care about somebody's home PC. I don't want to manage it. I don't want to maintain it because it's expensive. Those of us that do IT, if we're faced with managing those home machines, it's a losing proposition. Why? Because people at home inherently buy inexpensive machines. They're home machines. They're not professional level machines. They're not in the domain. They don't keep up-to-date antivirus software. They don't have malware protection. They don't even let their machines reboot after patches. And if you're going to place that under my kind of care, well, it's going to be expensive, really expensive. And none of you want me to troubleshoot a $75 Linksys access point at somebody's house for $180 an hour. So what do? We have to give those people connectivity. We have to have them the ability to work. Well, when we start looking at a hybrid cloud environment and I'm giving somebody remote servers or a Windows Virtual Desktop, they can use whatever machine they want. politely speaking, I don't care. They can run a Windows Home machine, they can run a Mac, they can do whatever they want. It's a machine that they've bought, it's a machine they're supplying. And if they don't choose to update it, if they don't choose to patch it, if they don't choose to keep all the software in there, it doesn't affect me because none of that's going to make its way down the wire to me in the Azure Data Center. No, I'm just going to give them a desktop. They're going to work, or I'm going to give them a remote app that they're going to click on and they're going to do their work. And their machine can have blue smoke coming out the back and it just doesn't matter. They need a new one, they can go get a new one. I don't have to have the burden of supplying that. If I do, I'm going to be giving them a laptop and I'm going to lock that machine down and I'm going to be managing and maintaining it the way, politely speaking, the way that I want it to be done as an IT guy. No installation of software, up-to-date antivirus, multi-factor authentication, all the things that we would all as IT folks would want to have on there because after all, we can't have that as a potential risk to the rest of the network. You can do that. And some people are doing that. We've had numerous conversations with a lot of companies that are kind of looking at us with this daunting look of, oh my God, we bought workstations a year ago and now we're going to have to go out and buy laptops for all our folks because they're going to work remote. Do you understand how much money that's going to be? Yes, I do. I really do understand that. And I'm telling you that you don't need to do it. Let your users run their home machines until the wheels fall off. If we take that money instead and invest it in Windows Virtual Desktop and a cloud hybrid environment, not only do we solve that problem, we reduce our risk, but we also take the number one risk off the table, which is the office. I'm really a big fan of thinking about it that way and not overspending. Some people are still going to want to have machines. Some companies, as time go by, will replace those workstations with laptops. That's going to be part of life with a lot of us. But I'm telling you that right now, you don't have to. You can continue to use our home machines, and you can do so safely without having to extend your coverage out to them. You may want to give them a stipend for internet. Okay, that's fine. But you don't have to do anything else. You certainly don't need to be wholesale replacing everything. So these are the advantages that I see. Pretty straightforward stuff, pretty easy to understand. So kind of to bring it all back together, if you're not considering doing this right now, you're missing out on a great opportunity to indemnify yourself and indemnify your customers. We are approaching all of our customers with this stuff in mind right now because it's important that we think ahead about this. Networks are evolving. Client-server applications that live on-premise are dying. They're not reliable and dependable to the level that they need to be any longer, especially in our COVID world. There's too much of a risk with bringing everybody into the office with having the single points of failure that we've identified. I'll actually go a step further. There's a difference between risk and risky. This, at this particular stage, is risky. If we're not thinking about splitting the network up and getting the office as a spoke instead of a hub, we're in this risky category. And with everybody working the way that they are now, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where people simply cannot work. And none of us can have that happen. With that said, I want to open up the floor to questions because it's an interesting topic. And I'm sure that there are people who are like, oh, wait a minute, I want to know a little bit more about this. So if you have a question, fire away. And we can't hear Alyssa.
You can't hear me. Rick, there was a question that came up a little while ago. What about if you're working in Azure and Azure goes down? Do you fail back to the Office servers?
That's a good question. So if you're working in Azure and the region that you're in goes down, you can either fail over to one of the other regions inside of Azure, or you can fail back to the Office if you want to, but that's probably not going to be the case if you're running fully in Azure. You'll just fail over to one of the other regions. Azure has got, I'm looking to Frank when I say this, 50, 60 different regions worldwide, something like that.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of regions. You usually want to stay in the general geographic area you're in, not go to like Southeast Asia or something if you're in, Central America. But yeah.
Yeah. So in the case of in that particular case, if the Southeast went down, you would just probably fail over to either the Midwest or to the West Coast, but you're going to stay inside of Azure. There's really no reason to fail over to your local network at all. And certainly there's no need to make the investment of all the equipment inside of your local network. I think the only thing that you really want inside your local network, as I said earlier, if you're a larger company, is a domain controller. And that's it, nothing else.
Rick, one of the things we run into in the banking world is they want us to ensure that if we're using cloud technology, that it's not going overseas. Now that's great, because I had to recently open up, I believe it was Denmark, so that we could get to some FDIC websites that are being hosted overseas, but we are not supposed to do it. Is it fairly easy with Azure to control what regions you can work out of and what regions you can't?
That's a really good question, Chip. The answer is yes. When you stand up your Azure network, one of the things that we have to do on the back end is we have to tell Azure basically which of the data centers that you're going to live in, right, by region. So the first rule of thumb with Azure is, as Frank was alluding to, is that you usually pick the data center, or the region, I should say, that's really geographically closest to you. And that's really because of two things, the way that Azure works. Azure routes traffic basically two ways. Best method for them is going to be to pull you into, to route your traffic through the geographic region that is closest to you, or they're going to route you through fastest method, which is going to be to pull you in through whatever region you're closest to in order to get you into the Azure ecosystem and then get you to the servers. You get to choose, number one, which door you basically want to go through. Compliance-based customers, we typically choose to push them through a designated region. This is the door that you come through. Your data only lives in this particular region. And the only reason that it would move over to another region is if you had chosen, what's called geographic redundancy. You may make the decision, Chip, because of the bank, you want to replicate all your stuff out to, say, the Denver region or the Midwest region for disaster recovery reasons. But if people are going to connect in the bank, when they go to connect with remote desktop or Windows Virtual Desktop, Azure is going to know when that traffic comes inbound to send you over to Denver, but it will never send you offshore unless you want it to run offshore. I can't think of any reason why you in particular would want your data to replicate outside the US, right?
No.
Right, but you can choose to keep it pretty much where you want. We do have some customers, as Frank will nod, we have some customers that actually, even though they're here in the Southeast, they don't want their data living in the Southeast. They actually want their data living central or Midwest or upper Midwest, particularly to get away from either hurricane-prone areas, flood-prone areas. They just see it as an extra level of kind of safety of, if I put it in the Midwest, the ping times are still very, very good. But if something was to happen in North Carolina, for example, I don't want to run the risk that it's going to affect me at all, right? We have some people that say, I want to be, here, for example. But it doesn't have to go offshore at all. Microsoft is actually pretty militant about that.
Good. One follow-up I've got to that. In our case, not everything we have runs on Windows or Azure. Our core mainframe for the bank, we run on an IBM.
Right.
And of course, we've got a redundant device at another location. In my customers, or in my team's case here, 4 or 5 of the programs that they run all day long are Windows-based programs, but they're calling back to this IBM mainframe for data.
Mm-hmm.
So in that kind of case, would there still be an advantage to moving? Which, I have one IBM mainframe and 30-something Windows servers.
Right.
So there would still be, I would assume, an advantage with the right bandwidth and some creative alternative routing opportunities to make sure the cloud could connect back to the mainframe.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a lot of customers that kind of in the early stages of kind of splitting their network up, they still have to maintain connectivity between their location and Azure through a tunnel in order to facilitate, information moving back and forth. It's not uncommon to do that. In your case, it would just be reverse. If you wanted to leave the IBM mainframes on site and let those calls come down the pipe that way from the Windows desktop, you absolutely can. And also, depending on what operating system those things, the IBM machines are running at this particular stage, it could very well be that some of the flavors of Linux and such that are in Azure can accommodate that. One of the things that I'm finding, I ran into this about 2 weeks ago, a lot of the companies that make the RIS6000, AS400 type dependent systems have now got VMs that have been based on some version of Linux that are being hosted inside of Azure in order to overcome that. Don't know if that's the case with some of the legacy systems that are there at the bank. It's certainly worth investigating, but I think for you, it would kind of be a Southern two-step, I would think. I mean, step one would be to get the 30 Windows servers kind of out there in Azure, keep a backup domain controller on the ground there at Talladega. It can facilitate communication as well with the IBMs, have a tunnel in place between the two. And believe it or not, people accessing the IBM stuff, it actually may run faster because all those data calls are not running through the network like that any longer. I think that step one would be to get the bulk of it away from the bank becoming a spoke, and then you can start to investigate what it looks like to move the IBM stuff if it's a reality. If it's not a reality now, I feel reasonably comfortable it'll happen soon, beyond a doubt. We haven't run into a system yet. This network that I was just telling you all about, that we have one of our customers that we're having to build this network for, this particular piece of software is built by Siemens. And when Frank started to do the investigation with them, we were actually pretty pleasantly surprised that they already had a pretty formidable document about what it looked like to actually host this in Azure versus having to buy the equipment to sit on the ground. It was well thought. In 100 years, I'm looking at Frank when I say this, we didn't think for a moment that Siemens would have embraced this kind of technology on the front end, not at all. So when we saw this document, they were, not only were they well ahead of it, they really got down, Frank, if I remember correctly, they got down to the very specific type of VM that we had to actually pick at the Azure level.
Yeah, they did. It was a book. It was really was. There were chapters, verses, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was pretty big and very comprehensive, and they had made leaps and bounds in the software. They were an old J2EE shop with Oracle, and now they support .NET and all that. So if you were running, COBOL on a AS400 or something like that, the chances are there's going to be porting and things like that may happen over time if you're not already ported over to Java.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. It's really pretty incredible to see the pace that that Microsoft has been keeping with getting stuff ported over and moved. The only things that we've run into so far that have been problematic to any level, I mean, there's one particular piece of document management software that we run into recently. It wasn't our doing, but we have a customer that we're working with that was choosing to use the legacy version of the document management software versus the more Azure-friendly web version. And it wasn't really designed to work in Azure, and the customer was having fits with it. Wasn't our recommendation. We inherited this customer, but that seemed to be a problem because this customer was dealing with 2,000-page PDF legal documents and such, and trying to edit those in a pooled virtual desktop. It requires just a lot of horsepower in order to be able to get to that. So they were dealing with that, and they were really more prone to, well, it was more amenable to them to use a personal desktop. But the rest of the softwares that we've run into, for the most part, have been really Azure friendly. I think the exception to that's going to be Zoom doesn't seem to work really well inside of a Windows Virtual Desktop because of the video capture piece. It works, but it doesn't work as good as it should. Teams was having a problem in the early stages, within the last few months, it actually now works pretty well inside of a WVD environment. That's absolutely Microsoft's desire, was to make that work really well. But there are certain programs that I tell you that I still think it's worthwhile to run them local. I'm a firm believer, Zoom, Teams, those things should run localized because they're tapping into video and you don't want it to be choppy or break up. I do find myself working locally on complicated spreadsheets and such. I could do them in Windows Virtual Desktop. I have confidence now that they would work, but purely from a comfort level and in real estate and such, I still work on them local. I'm moving in the direction now of doing more and more in a remote virtual desktop because, now that I've been working, from my home office for the better part of the last 6 months, I less and less do I feel the need to have local software installed. It's pretty amazing when I see what I have the capability of doing in the hybrid cloud versus what I could do 6 months or even a year ago. I've become a very big champion of it, and my team will tell you that I was in the complete opposite place even 8 months ago. I did not want to be there. I did not have the confidence the technology worked at a level that I was going to find acceptable, let alone customers. And I am a changed man because of it. So I believe in it. I think it's the right way to go. And it has the opportunity to fix a lot of problems that people have. The biggest of which is, listen, the remote desktop piece, it's no joke with the number of people that are starting to work remote. This is part of our culture now. This genie is not going back in the bottle. People are going to be working remote from this time onward. I'm starting to see some trends and things that I read of companies that are actually saying more and more of their people are going to work remote permanently, and that they're just setting up space inside their office when people just need to come together and work for short periods of time. They're called on-sites. Basically, they're carving out space where people can come and sit down and collaborate face-to-face for shorter periods of time, but the bulk of their time they're working remote. I think with many companies, that's going to be the new norm, beyond the shadow of a doubt. And I also can't lose sight of the fact that COVID hasn't gone away. People are going to still get sick. And when they get sick, companies are going to demand that they get quarantined. Even though they may be feeling better, people are going to demand that those folks stay at home for a month, maybe longer, certainly until some therapy or a vaccine comes to play. With that said, we have to make these people productive. If I wasn't feeling well and God forbid I got this, and then after 3 or 4 days I felt fine and I was working for Mark's not going to want me near his office. You just stay home and you work there for at least a couple of weeks until we make sure everything just kind of calms down. But by the way, I do want you to work full days, so you need to have the ability to use all your applications seamlessly versus going in through a VPN to our office connection, which 50 other people are trying to use simultaneously. And if somebody starts to watch cats swatting at balls over that internet connection, it slows everybody down. We can't have that happen, right? We've dealt with that up to this point, but now we have to start thinking forward about what the world is going to look like in terms of these telecommuters. It's permanent. How are we going to accommodate them? How are we going to allow them to work at the level we would expect them to work when they're in the office? These are all the questions that we have to start asking ourselves and starting to put things in place to accommodate that, because it's not going to go back the way that it was. It's simply not. Even though the romance of working at home for many people has gone away, we're still going to have a large group of people. And the narrative is going to change too. You're not going to be able to stand in judgment of people because they're not feeling well or they've got COVID and they choose to work at home. Quite frankly, I want to take that off the table. I don't want to have that conversation. If you're not feeling well and you need to work from home, great. Here you go. Use your Windows Virtual Desktop and go to work. Keep your germs at home. And maybe that's not just COVID. Maybe that's the flu. Maybe it's anything that anybody gets sick with. We just don't want them in our offices any longer. And quite frankly, I think that everybody now is highly sensitive to the fact, this is my personal opinion, if somebody so much as coughs or sneezes, they're just going to assume that they've got COVID.
If you've coughed in a grocery store and seen the looks you get,
oh yeah,
to your point,
people scatter. People scatter.
Yeah.
This is going to be short-term life. I shouldn't say short-term life. This is going to be the way that things are going to be, at least for right now. So It's changing the narrative. We're living in unusual times. We now have to start considering unusual tactics. Well, now's the time to start embracing these kind of things and steering people in the right direction, because it does work. And let's find where that balance is for people and implement it so that people are comfortable with it. Does that make sense to everybody? Wonderful. Anybody have any final questions about some of this stuff? I hope it's now not quite as confusing to everyone. And I also hope that you kind of just had that moment, in the middle of this and said, my gosh, I'm actually already using this and I didn't even realize that I was using it. Now I just got to talk to my customers about the fact that they've been using it all the time, and that they've developed a sense of confidence in the technology. It does work. It works really, really well. And now we just have to share the knowledge with other folks and design a plan to get them to that place. It's not terribly difficult to do, just like anything else. It's like an elephant. You just eat it one bite at a time. That's all you do. Final questions?
Yeah, Rick, I have one quick question about cost management.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a particular tool or process that you've used that you find is really effective for helping folks estimate those costs?
We do. There are a couple of different tools that we have. The most reliable tool that we use is a spreadsheet that we've developed internally. We've taken what we've learned on the Azure side. We use the front end that we use for our Azure environment and our management is a tool called Nerdio, which I think you're familiar with. Nerdio is really great because it allows us as a partner to be able to do a good job of taking what is normally a wildly unpredictable level of spend that you would have with Azure and being able to make it predictable, right? to a large degree. We've taken that information and the things that we've learned just from usage and tracking from our own customers, and we've developed a program internally where we can level off that spend. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have a separate tool that is made available to us through distribution that allows us to go in and actually audit Azure spend for any customer. We can point this tool at their Azure existing subscription. It will go in and harvest information and poll, and then come back to us with recommendations, places that they're overspending, places that perhaps are underspending, and then we can come up with a plan to come up to the customer and say, this is what your environment looks like now. We think we can make these changes in order to get your spending kind of in alignment with what is considered best practice, and then implement those changes. The cost analysis piece is something that's new to us. The cost analysis is not new to us. Auditing Azure and then being able to make recommendations based on that is new to us. We're starting to do it more and more, and we're actually putting that tool out there as a skill set that we have that we can offer to other people like yourself, for example, where you can bring a customer to us and say, hey, listen, can you go in and audit their spend with Azure and tell me where they're spending too much money, because I think they're spending too much money. The customer thinks they're spending too much money. Can you audit the environment and then come back to us with a list of recommendations? We're doing that now. Frank's been doing a lot of that as of late. And it's really, really produced some very sizable savings for customers. In addition to producing sizable savings, it's also enabled their resources to be used better and offer better performance. So you kind of get both, which is really, really nice. But we do have expertise there, and we're glad to share it with you.
Yeah, Brian, there's also a lot of gotchas too that aren't on any kind of price sheet that
right.
You just have to know with your transferring data between regions. Things like that Microsoft just loves for you to do, but they don't tell you about. And
those data transfers have been ones that have been a little bit been surprises.
Yes, yeah. That's kind of the way that the system operates is in that manner. So, we have the ability to look at just about anybody at this point and say, this is where you're spending and this is where it needs to be adjusted, and then come back with savings or better performance or both, which has been great, because 95% of the people that I've seen, and I think this is true of Frank, they go into Azure and they basically just set themselves up as pay as they go, right? Which is the highest level of the meter running, right? And what that's the first kind of deadly sin that they've committed. The second deadly sin is they took their network that they have in their office and they built a memory for memory, CPU for CPU, carbon copy of that environment inside of Azure. And we know from our experience that that's absolutely something that you shouldn't do, because an Azure network works entirely different than an on-premise network. We get calls from people constantly that say, you know, I duplicated everything I have in my office. Surely in Azure it should run faster or run just as good, but it runs like hell, and we don't understand why. And then we start to look at what they've done, and we have to explain to them that everything on a LAN has to do with CPU memory and storage. Everything in Azure has to do with IOPS. And the moment that we start to educate them about that, the bulb goes off over most people's heads, and they're like, now I see where these bottlenecks are. I'm doing it wrong. Yeah, but we can help you do it right. And that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do. Good question, Brian. Thank you for that.
Great presentation. Thank you, guys.
I appreciate it very much. Any final thoughts? Alyssa, any final questions?
I don't have any final questions, but I do have a final thought. Just want to let everybody know we've had a lot of requests to repeat the Teams webinar. It was our first, and we neglected to record it. So we are going to be repeating that in 2 weeks. I'll have information out on that probably tomorrow. But I wanted to let everybody know that 2 weeks from today, we will be repeating the Teams webinar. So if you're interested in that, please do join us. And like I said, information will be out shortly.
Thank you, Alyssa, for that. If anybody has any questions that come up after the fact, you know that we're a phone call or an email away. Please don't be shy. Reach out to us. We're glad to help to whatever capacity that we can. Until next time, I wish everybody continued good health and safety. We're here for you in case you need us. Take care.
Thank you, Rick.